Hey everyone, welcome back to the Apologetics. I'm glad you joined us today. Today I'm joined by Tim Howard from Invoking Theism. We're going to be looking at Paulogia's video on the Kalam. What's up, Tim?
What's up, man?
Awesome. If you know this channel, you know Tim. Great YouTube channel over at Invoking Theism. We're going to be looking at this video. Do you have anything you want to say before we just get right into this, Tim?
Just want to say, we're not kind of, our focus here isn't really just to be tribal, but to kind of, I guess I see it in a way of kind of raising the philosophical bar by kind of going into certain videos. People are going to kind of stumble along certain videos on YouTube, and I kind of want to, in our response to these kinds of critiques, I kind of want to show like kind of where the current thought and where the current thinking is at, and not to humiliate Paul or anything like that, but to kind of just kind of give our critiques and show that, hey, maybe we can have a kind of higher standard reasoning here and maybe see things at certain angles that other people might not see if they stumble across this particular video. So
yeah, and I mean I feel the same way as you. Like, it's like we're responding to Paul, but it's not like really us versus Paul. It's just trying to like build ideas and getting closer to truth. At least that's the way I see it.
exactly.
But yeah, you ready to get this thing rolling? All right, let's do it. For you listening, we're just going to play clips and do this.
Sweet.
Does God exist? Or is the material universe all that is, or ever was, or ever will be?
Are those the only two options?
I mean, I'll just pause very briefly, but I mean, that is a little fair because it almost is a little bit of a false dilemma. I mean, I don't know if like very like outside of a mind of like the laws of logic that could cause anything. But I don't know. It's a fair point that it was just really interesting that you brought up briefly. Do you have any ideas, Tim?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it goes to say, I mean, maybe even without saying that this video in particular, this is like a video that you would play at church. Like, this isn't really something that is supposed to be that representative of what's in the literature. I feel like this is kind of what it is, and so I'm not surprised that only gave those two options and things of that sort. It's not really that nuanced, but yeah,
no, I get that because it is like this William Lane Craig video is literally a 5-minute, like, if you've never heard of the Kalam, here you go.
Yeah.
That's kind of the intention behind it.
And this is specifically on like just the science data. It's not even like, it doesn't even have the philosophical arguments in this one, so it's not even the whole package of Craig's Kalam.
Yeah, but we'll just keep going.
One approach to answering this question is the cosmological argument.
But unfortunately, it's not a very good one. Admittedly, there's no shortage of videos about
the Kalam cosmological argument.
The Kalam cosmological argument.
The Kalam argument.
The Kalam cosmological argument.
Cosmological Argument. Debunk.
and the reasons why it doesn't work as intended. But it seems nearly every day a Christian brings it up to me in comments or social media or even in person. And in the famous words of Inigo Montoya,
I don't think it means what you think it means.
since my viewers have asked me to cover more William Lane Craig, and he's the man responsible for its current popularity, let's take a look at the version from Craig's Reasonable Faith Ministry.
It goes like this. Whatever begins to exist has a cause.
Wait, pause
The universe began to exist. Therefore...
Yeah. What's up, Tim?
They want him to cover more William Lane Craig, but he doesn't go to the Blackwell Companion article, like essay. He doesn't like go through like what's presented in like Reasonable Faith or whatever. He goes through like this video you'd play at like a church, bro. Like, I just kind of find that funny. Like, he's like, okay, he's like, you want me to interact with more with William Lane Craig? I'm gonna go find like the most basic presentation on the Kalam you could possibly find. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to me. Like, that's kind of what I mean by like raise the bar. Like and people are gonna get the wrong idea. Like, this is the Kalam. Like, this is the entire Kalam. Apparently, this is William Lane Craig. Like, I don't know, man. That I feel like that's a weakness in this critique of his.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't go with like the strongest version of the Kalam that you could look at. Though, like, I mean, Paul isn't like going through like book in his response video. He's not going through books, so he's trying to find a YouTube video. So I do understand that a little bit. But I mean, in terms of like getting an actual defense of the Kalam, probably going to like a 5-minute YouTube video is probably not the best move. But I mean, even that being said, he makes up some interesting points that we can kind of go into here as we keep on going.
Therefore, the universe has a cause.
The first thing worth noting is that this is the entire argument, and yet the word God appears nowhere. For the sake
Yeah, this is the one thing that I was a little bit frustrated listening to with this video, because like I understand responding to like a short video, and like we're literally responding to a 9-minute video on the Kalam by Paul. But like, you know, if you've like listened to Craig's debates or read anything that he's written on the Kalam, he does give further argumentation for going from the universe as a cause to God. Like this isn't like the end of the story.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's if people are familiar with Craig's formulation of the argument, I mean, even going just down up to a more fundamental level, like cosmological arguments have what's referred to in literature as like 2 stages, and every cosmological argument is going to have a stage 1, which shows that there is some feature of reality that requires an explanation or cause, and then stage 2 is showing like why that, like what are the features of the cause. And so Craig doesn't mention God syllogistically, but when he is going through conceptual analysis or bridging the gap from the cause to what he would call God or a divine cause, he spells that all out, but it's not in the premises themselves. I mean, you could even, if you wanted to, you could say like, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. No, instead of the universe has a cause, like then this cause is like what we would call God or something like that. You could add that little last clause there if you want. It's not in the argument syllogistically, but I mean, no cosmological argument doesn't deal with a stage 2. So I feel like just from the nature of cosmological arguments, this is not like trivial, you know?
Yeah, and I think it is very fair. Like you talk about like Andrew Loki's book that you had like for reference as well. Like there's a lot of work here on how we get from the universe having a cause to God. It's not like theists are like, oh, the universe has a cause, oh God, no argumentation needed. Yeah, that's not how that works. We'll keep on.
For the sake of discussion, I could accept the entire thing as is, and all we would have to agree to is that there was a sufficient cause for the universe. To make the leap that this cause is a deity is entirely outside of the scope of the cosmological argument and does not follow from the premises. Let's say
I feel like we already talked about this, but yeah.
Someone emerged from a crowd to lay claim to the throne based on their royal lineage.
Prove that you are the son of the king.
Every human who was born has parents.
This is true.
I was born.
Also true.
Therefore, I have parents.
But that doesn't mean your father was the king.
Nonsense. Hand me the crown.
So even if the Kalam succeeds, it ultimately fails. But still, let's let Craig take a closer look.
And the only thing I'd say is, like, just watching this YouTube video, you could get that impression of the Kalam or like cosmological arguments that there's no argumentation from necessary being to God. But like, you just have to look at further like cosmological arguments and like just read Craig's work or something, and you can see the connection from first cause to God.
Yeah, I'm just kind of wondering like, what would happen if someone in conversation, like someone watches this video and then he goes out and he meets a Christian, like he meets a Christian who's familiar, and then just says, this argument isn't about God. Like, what is that supposed to do then? Like, where do we go from there dialectically? Is it just a conversation stopper, or like what happens when the person, like someone like me, says, it's not in the actual premises themselves, but what it means to be a cause is you have to have the cause of the universe, you have to have these particular features, and that's what we do in stage 2 of the argument. And he spells it out. I feel like someone might take away from this video that all they really need to do is point out that the argument isn't about God, and then they don't have to really think about it any further. And then, so I feel like, you know, encouraging people to like pursue truth and to sharpen their reasoning skills and things, to look into the actual literature and look into what the main defenders of the argument are saying, and then what the actual critiques of those presentations are, and not simply something that wouldn't allow for further conversation or dialogue to take place. So someone like Oppie, someone like Morrison, someone like Smith, Quentin Smith, all have really good critiques of Craig's argument, that allows you to have further discussion and to talk about other things. And it's just a really good way to kind of really get yourself into some rigorous philosophy. So
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with Paul that there's a gap problem from first cause to God, but then there's also been work on the gap problem, which
Right.
I don't know if he really addresses that here.
Is the first premise true? Let's consider. Believing that something can pop into existence without a cause is more of a stretch than believing in magic. At least with magic, you've got a hat and a magician.
Did Craig just admit that a good analogy for God would be a magician? Interesting. If we're going to evaluate the truth of the first premise, we might first consider defining terms. What does it mean to begin to exist? For example, when does a chair begin to exist? Is it when the plans are drawn up? When the wood is cut? When the pieces are assembled? The first time someone sits on it? In fact, perhaps we would be better off reworking the entire argument. Premise 1, everything that begins to exist is a rearrangement of things that already exist. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, the universe is a rearrangement of things that already exist. That is.
What do you think of Paul's version of the Kalam here?
I mean, I feel like there's a common theme here. If you just read the literature, and Craig defines exactly what begins to exist means, in Locke's new novel Kalam argument, he defines what begin to exist means. I wrote them both down. I want to address that, and then I want to address this argument. So Craig's definition of begin to exist is X begins to exist if and only if X exists at T1, and 2, T is either the first time in which X exists or separated from any time T less than T by a non-degenerate temporal interval, and 3, X is existing at T1 is a tensed fact. Locke's definition is is simpler than that one. It is 1, X exists at T, and the actual world includes no states of affairs in which X exists timelessly, and 2, T is either the first time at which X exists or is separated from any time less than T at which X exists by an interval during which X does not exist. So, definition from Craig, definition from Locke. If you read Kuhn's and Proust, because they have their own formulations of the Kalam too, they define what it means to begin to exist. So this is not a mystery, and that's the problem here, which is I'm afraid of what the impression lay people are going to get from watching this video. They're going to go out and think that this has never ever been discussed, what it means to begin to exist. Now, specifically, this argument about things are rearrangements is not a blow to the Kalam at all, because it assumes that it's a common argument that they think that begins to exist only means ex nihilo, from nothing. And Locke points out that beginning to exist, you have beginning to exist simpliciter, which is a state of affair, something. There was once nothing and then there was something. And then you have beginning to exist from a previous state of affairs, which is what which is what he's talking about. So when you cut down a tree and you make furniture, like he's talking about, you are transitioning from a previous state of affairs to a new state of affairs. The state of affairs being that you had the tree, and its roots were still in the ground and everything, to that tree being cut down and then cultivated into a chair. And a chair is a completely new state of affairs. So, but that still constitutes as beginning to exist. And so it also has some underlying metaphysical assumptions, such as views of composition, such as that there are no composite objects, which would be mereological nihilism. In that there are no composite objects, there are just things arranged objects-wise. So I have a cup, a blender bottle here, right? The blender bottle doesn't actually exist. It's just things arranged blender bottle-wise. So they would say that the universe, things are arranged universe-wise, but there's no such thing as the universe as an object or as a whole. So there's a lot of assumptions being made here. And I would like, if I were to have a conversation with someone, I'd ask, okay, why do you have this particular view of mereology? Why do you have this particular view of begins to exist? It's very restrictive. So it does no damage to the argument.
If Paul's view is true, would it lead then to the follow say something like, I don't exist then? Because then there would nothing be in my own existence that's unique to me. I'd just be completely be a rearrangement of previously existing things. Do you think that would follow from what Paul's saying?
Sorry, say that again.
I said, if Paul's right here, would it follow then then we'd have to deny our own existences? Because then someone like me, if there's nothing new about me, then I'm just a rearrangement of all pre-existing things. I'm just wondering if that would follow from this kind of skepticism.
Yeah, there wouldn't be people. There would just be particles in different arrangements. So you'd have the simples, and then the simples just take different arrangements. So there is no such thing as people, right? It's just particles arranged as what we think is people wise. Yeah.
Yeah. The only other thing I thought about with Paul's kind of everything that begins to exist, just a rearrangement of things that already exist, the amount of commitment he has to make here is vast. If you're gonna say that everything that exists is just almost pre-existed, it always existed, it almost sounds like. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, Paul. There's 10 to the 80th number of atoms out there, and that's 100 gazillion quintillion. That's not a number of atoms, but in Paul's view, then there couldn't have been one more, and there couldn't have been one less. And all these atoms have particular size and shape and density and mass, all these different things. And it seems like a pretty complex hypothesis of the foundation to say all these things exist necessarily. So that was the only other thing I thought about with regards to this little bit.
Yeah, no, exactly. Those are good points.
That is equally as valid as the Kalam, and brings us to the conclusion that our universe came not from nothing, but from something pre-existing, which we'll get to later. As for a cause, well, in order for a cause and effect to have relevance, it's clear that one would need to have time as well. Cause must come temporally before effect. If we try to extend this premise beyond time as we know it, then we'd be in a realm where there might not be causation as we know it. Outside the scope of our universe, we can't know if this premise holds.
But what about...
What do you think about this, the causation outside of time thing?
Right. The objection to atemporal causation, and then he's holding to a view of temporal priority in terms of causation. So the interesting thing about that is that's actually pretty common argument. It's actually been fleshed out by other philosophers in greater detail, but it's not a problem because Craig's Kalam specifically depends on simultaneous causation or causal simultaneity, where you can have a cause and its effect occur simultaneously. An example would be if you lean two books on one another, you have simultaneous causation, which is the effect of the books being held up by one another is being caused by them pressing upon one another. It's happening simultaneously. Craig gives the example of a glass ball on a pillow, and the depression is being caused by the glass ball on the pillow. And the effect is the depression, and the cause is the glass ball, but they are occurring simultaneously. That is how Craig looks at God actualizing the universe, given his particular philosophy of time and his metaphysics of how God's divine action works. So Craig would say something like that God then enters into time via this simultaneous causation relation. Now, so then you'd have to kind of show that simultaneous causation is incoherent. But even on atemporal causation, I have a few notes on that. So causation need not require these temporal relations, this temporal priority. Even Craig notes that temporal priority can be treated merely as an accidental generalization of our daily experiences as humans. It's kind of akin to human beings saying human beings have always lived on Earth, but that wasn't true until 1968, and we went to the moon, right? So that's so that's kind of how Craig looks at it. And then even philosopher Bruce Reichenbach even says that we can treat causation as a conditional or relation of production. So there are formulations of causation that do not depend on any temporal premise, any temporal language. I think even Nancy Cartwright gives a definition of causation that is in terms of probability, that E causes or brings about an effect, and it has a certain probability of E bringing about a current effect. or E has a certain probability of being brought about as an effect from its cause. So there are different formulations of causation in the literature that are discussed in philosophy, and this is just metaphysics, that do not depend on temporal priority.
Yeah, that's good. And the only thing, it seems like you saying like, actually, wait, let's just go to the next bit. I had thought, but I think it's in this next section.
What about our second premise? Did the universe begin, or has it always existed? Atheists have typically said that the universe has been here forever.
Again, it's important to understand terms. In this case, the difference between universe and cosmos as they are used in science, since that's where the discussion will be going. The cosmos, as the late great Carl Sagan put it,
the cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be.
Whereas the universe is best defined as the single instantiation of spacetime where we live. The universe is part of the cosmos, like a storage unit is part of a storage facility, and we have no way of knowing if we are merely one among many universes, or one in a succession of universes, or maybe the only universe. What's important is that modern cosmologists don't say that the universe has been here forever and is just there and that's all, as Craig asserts. That's how they would describe the cosmos. In science, cosmos and universe are not interchangeable terms. Craig's video goes...
What do you think about the cosmos and universe thing?
I mean, this is non-trivial, and we kind of all understand this. Craig specifically stipulatively uses it as space-time and all its constituents, or space-time and all existing matter. So even if you have a multiverse, those universes have causes. And like, let's say this multiverse is governed by like meta laws, let's say, and things, and it's going to have those boundary conditions as well. And then so it's going to kind of push the beginning of universe or universes back a level. And it doesn't really get into what shape of what global shape of reality is being talked about here. So like, let's use terms like natural reality here. And are we saying that this is infinite? Like, so are we saying that it's the explanations here are like necessary contingent, like contingent, like necessary all the way through, infinite regress, necessary infinite regress, right? So you get into these different things, and the current state of cosmology, there are a multiplicity of models that we have, and some of them are committed to like an ex nihilo, like genesis of the universe at the Big Bang, right? And then some of them say that there was, in the pre-inflationary era, there was pre-existing material in which the universe would have emerged from, but then that leaves out of the question what the origin of the pre-existing material is. And it is an unwarranted step to say that then there would have been no cause of that pre-existing material, let's say, because we need quantum cosmology for that. We don't have a working theory of quantum gravity to give us the kind of physics we need to describe that era of the universe, that early universe, that temperature of the universe in its early phases. So we can't really say with any certainty, and it's really just speculation and conjecture on what kind of your world picture is. So there's nothing you can really rule out that you would have a beginningless state of affairs that is material. And that's basically what I'm trying to say. So people, even Lawrence Krauss admitted, like, yeah, it's most likely, given a likelihood formulation of this, that our universe did begin to exist. And it leaves out of the question whether or not our universe was the result of some crunch, some bounce, some ekpyrotic brain, like coming together type of thing. Even still, it just pushes the beginning of the universe back a step, because then you have to account for those things too. And so that kind of just goes all unaddressed. And so the problem here is that it's dependent on a very speculative physics that we just really don't have to really say anything, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like Josh's example and like how reason can lead to God. Like thinking about this, like in terms of like the necessary like being or whatever it may be. Because he talks about like having like the big blob of everything. And like we can explain everything because everything exists within this big blob of everything, and we can explain how we got to today like within this big blob of everything. So thinking about kind of like Paul, I almost like we might agree. I might agree with Paul in terms of like if he's talking about the cosmos being this big blob of everything that exists. I mean, I'd agree that we could explain everything within this big blob of everything, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, exactly. And there are even other models. There are even other models such as like a timelessly existing initial state, which is something that either Graham Oppie would opt in for, that then produces the universe either via quantum fluctuation or something like that. But then what you'd have to do is you would have to look at the science and the metaphysics and saying, does the science actually support a timeless model? And then and then where do our metaphysics land? Does it make sense for there to be this timelessly existing initial state? Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, no, I'm tracking with you. All right, we'll keep on playing here.
Video goes on to appeal to science's acceptance of the Big Bang Theory to establish that the universe had a beginning. As long as Craig sticks to the scientific definition of universe and doesn't pretend that it's the same as the cosmos, then we can skip that part and all just agree. Oh, wait.
First, let's consider the second law of thermodynamics. It tells us the universe is slowly running out of usable energy.
I'm going to want to talk about the first law of thermodynamics, so it's good that Craig affirms the second law. Carry on.
It's quite plausible, then, that both premises of the argument are true. This means that the conclusion is also true. The universe has a cause.
Right. The argument concludes that the universe has a sufficient cause. Still no discussion of God, and the video is almost over.
And since...
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about the gap problem. Do you have anything else you want to add at this point, Tim, or do you want to keep on going here?
Nope, it's good.
Awesome.
The universe can't cause itself. Its cause must be beyond the space-time universe.
So far, so good.
It must be spaceless.
Whoa, we went over the rails right on the first one. Craig himself describes our universe as the space-time universe. The Big Bang was the start of our universe's local space coordinates, x, y, and z, and time, t. But just as a piece of graph paper has its own localized XY spatial coordinate system, that piece of paper still exists in the universe's three-dimensional space. The cosmos may well have its own spatial dimensions. It may have many more dimensions than our four, or perhaps it could have even 0 dimensions. The point is, there could be any number of sufficient causes for our universe that exist in some semblance of space outside of our version of it. The cause needn't be spaceless.
You have any thoughts here, Tim?
Yeah, so the problem with that is it kind of just gets into like what it means to begin to exist. And I already said that Craig talks about space-time, all its constituents, space-time and all existing matter. That's what he means when he uses the universe. And if what we understand as the as space-time, a specific manifold with well-defined geometric properties, etc., then we have to kind of get into like what would it mean for something to actually begin to exist? What would it mean for something physical, for like some of these physical entities to actually begin to exist and require a particular cause? And so I wrote down that when we think about time and time intervals, we think about t, and t could be instants or moments of non-zero finite duration. And this definition of begins to exist works for non-zero moments of time, moments and intervals of time. So as long as you have a finite duration of some physical state's existence, then you plausibly can reasonably assume that that's kind of like something in our minds we can see in now analyzing causation, that is the type of thing that would require a cause. But it's going to lack the cause would have to lack the particular properties of said thing that is beginning to exist with its finite duration. So we know that physical things have accidental properties, right? And these accidental properties are going to be like, bounded properties, finite parameters, arbitrary limits, as you know. And so to have to analyze the cause through conceptual analysis, you're going to kind of have to say something that is not that, because then that's just going to push it back a level, and that's going to require a cause. So
yeah, it almost seems like, to me, it's almost something like the infinite regress idea, where like what caused our universe was just another one, and what caused that one another one, all the way down, turtles all the way down, or like maybe like the idea that like, well, what caused the universe? Well, it's just the pre-existing matter energy, which I think is something he's getting into in just a moment. So that seems like what he's kind of thinking here,
right? And that seems like then he would take that there is some past infinite state of affairs in which energy exists, and then at some point energy actualizes a new state of affairs in which gives rise to a specific space-time manifold. So,
which is a very interesting thing that I'm sure we'll talk about pretty soon here.
Timeless?
What applied to the 3 dimensions of space equally applies to the 4th dimension of time. A stopwatch has its own temporal system, but the one pressing the start button still exists in their own temporal system. The cosmos may have its own system of time, or it may exist in such a state that the idea of time is incoherent. We don't yet know what the sufficient cause of the universe was, but it could easily have been temporal.
Immaterial.
You have any thoughts there, Tim?
it just goes back to what I was saying.
Yeah, I think we're good there.
This is getting repetitive, but there's no reason to assert that the cause couldn't have been a material manifestation. Scientists don't think that the Big Bang was from nothing, but rather the expansion of a singularity containing all of our universe's matter and energy. Whatever was happening inside that singularity would certainly have been material as we know it. Earlier, Craig appealed to the second law of thermodynamics, but let's talk about the first law. Energy can be transformed, but it cannot be created nor destroyed. If this law holds, we need not appeal to a god to deal with infinite regress. Our eternal constant is energy. If energy has always existed, then it follows naturally that any existing universes could be a mere transformation of a part of that energy. This is my personal cosmology, that if something has to exist eternally, that thing is energy. The advantage of choosing energy over positing an eternal god is that we all agree that energy is a real thing.
Uncool.
What do you think about the energy thing?
Yeah, that's really interesting because, oh man, I just lost my thought. So saying that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Then he goes to make a scientific statement, right? That's just what we understand in thermodynamics and dynamical systems, right? But then he goes on to make a philosophical claim that, okay, that means that energy is past infinite. And he doesn't give any reason, any philosophical support for why he's making that, why he's jumping to that conclusion that then energy is then past infinite. And then that exhausts the totality of reality. And he doesn't give a justification for how you could even have a past infinite state of affairs, how that's metaphysically possible. So when you read like someone like Loke's book, he goes through and says, actually, you cannot have it's not metaphysically possible for there to be a past infinite state of affairs. So that infinite regress that we talked about, where causal chains can actually be infinite. So that assumption there, and then you have so it's not a statement of science. This is pretty metaphysical. And then he says that he has some theoretical advantages for positing energy over God. And so the issue there is that it's not clear how this vague kind of descriptor energy does any of the explanatory heavy lifting that Paul's going to want it to do. Any advantages in explanatory power, so having an increase in posterior probability, as well as having a greater prior probability than, let's say, a theistic posit. Now, I don't even like using the Kalam argument. I don't use it. I don't even endorse it. But I can see, if I examine this theoretically and look at the advantages and disadvantages, energy seems to be too simple of a hypothesis to explain anything. Because if he's saying that there is something that this energy has these properties to bring about a universe, there's nothing to really say that then the universe should have the low entropy conditions it did have in that end of the universe. or that it would have these orderly, simple laws governed by these orderly, simple laws and things of that sort, and that its inflation would be as we have observed it, and things of that sort, and also that he's going to pretty much take it and bite the bullet as a brute fact, all of the properties of energy. So everything that we use mathematically to describe and statistically to describe in thermodynamics is going to be simply brute. And that's going to be what the system is, versus just positing a beginningless, sufficiently powerful cause. And that's all. Then syntactically, in that comparison, it seems as though it's going to Paul's theory is going to be, his personal cosmology is going to have a disadvantage there. So,
yeah, I wonder, like, there's a lot of things I was thinking about as you were talking, and one is like the limits idea that we've already touched on with, like, if energy is your foundation, you're going to have like a particular number of, like, say, like particles or whatnot with a particular like size and mass and shape, like all these things, and like that's a limit. And then another thing that kind of hit me is literally just as we were talking about this today, is like Paul was just tweeting like God did it is not an explanation of anything. What seems like here, like Paul's like okay with saying, well, energy did it, and there's no further explanation. Like this is just it, case closed, wrap it up, da 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 da. And like in that sense, like even like maybe like the existence of God would have an advantage here, because people are willing to ask, well, what explains God? Like if you look at, like, I was talking with Chad McIntosh about this on the show on Wednesday. Like people will say, well, why is it God rather than something else? It seems like there's an advantage here where like the theists are willing to ask like more questions than it seems like Paul does, like in this sense. And then there's things like the other thing that kind of got me is like, well, we all know that energy is a real thing. We don't all know if God's a real thing. Well, what is God? God is a mind, a necessary mind. We all know that minds are real things. Like the surest thing that we know about ourselves is that we have a mind and that we exist. Maybe we're in the matrix, maybe it's an illusion, but we're not wrong about our own mental states and our own existence. So like in that sense, like energy comes after experience. Like experience is fundamental, and that's what the theist poses. So we could be wrong. I mean, it seems like crazy, but maybe we're wrong. I'm not saying I'm a solipsist here, but I'm just saying like it just seems like experience is fundamental.
No, it is. I mean, that's how we apprehend everything, and that's why I'm not a scientific realist, but I'm kind of I'm more of an constructive empiricist in that way. Even without that, it's difficult to see exactly, to assess exactly what Paul's world picture is here. That is energy's past infinite existence. Is that a brute contingency, or is it a necessity? Does it necessarily have to be an infinite regress, or does it? Or so you see what I'm saying? Like you got to work out the world picture here instead of just positing energy, and then you can do the theoretical comparisons then. So you get into those things, so it's just not quite clear exactly like what explanatory heavy lifting is doing, what explanatory heavy lifting Paul's view is doing. And then there doesn't really even to see a way to assess what worlds or what kinds of worlds Paul's foundation, that being this past infinite energy, would likely produce. So like I kind of went into that earlier. I have no idea what worlds are most probable given energy. I have no idea what if energy would exist simply in that state and wouldn't produce any space-time manifold. It's unclear. Unlike on theism, and I don't like Craig's model of God. So if I had to use my model of God, then I would say that kind of taking the Swinburnian approach, that we'd actually have something to allow us to see what worlds are most likely, because it's given of God's perfect goodness in conjunction with his perfect rationality. So God is simply influenced by the good and his reasons for actualizing what is good. And so God wants to realize what is good. And so then you can kind of assess exactly kind of what kinds of worlds God would actualize. So what kind of things, and then you can kind of assess, okay, well, it's ultimately going to depend on the value of the particular universe. So you have universe A, universe B, universe C, and then you have universe A, B, C have particular probabilities assigned to them, but the probabilities come given their respective values. So if universe C is more disorderly than universe B, God is going to choose to actualize universe B, because a universe that has uniform order has more value than a universe with certain pockets of order, and then the rest of the universe is disorderly. And so God's going to want to actualize things with order. And then you can kind of see there on this energy hypothesis, I don't know what worlds this is going to produce and what their characteristics and the general features are going to be. And that's the issue here. So
yeah, that's good. We'll keep going.
The cause of our universe could easily have been a caused thing. Perhaps our universe was caused by a quantum fluctuation, by the end of a prior universe, by the flapping of wings of a cosmic butterfly. The Kalam argues only for a sufficient cause of our particular universe. If something has to be uncaused, let's go with energy.
And unimaginable.
Well, I don't know if this is really true about like the Kalam arguing specifically for our universe. Like in this video, they always say about the scientific evidence for our universe. But like if you look at like Craig's work on the philosophical arguments, he'll show that like, well, there can't be like a past infinite universe. The universe has to be finite. It's like there could be like universes before this one. There just couldn't be an infinite number of universes. I think Craig would agree with that.
Right. Yeah. There's going to have to be a finite causal history. And so causal chains are going to metaphysically have to be finite and not infinite. And so then that's going to require there to be a beginningless cause with particular characteristics to actualize those causal state of affairs that we perceive as the natural order. And then he just kind of brings up like other alternative like models to the Big Bang. And like I said, like, we kind of need quantum cosmology. Not all of these models are made equal. Like, you can't just posit a model and have it be equiplausible. So he's just kind of throwing out models. And some of these models are outdated. Some of these models have mathematical errors or formulations. I mean, even if he brings up like string theory models, like string theory isn't really physics at this point. It's purely mathematical. It's highly mathematical in its formulations. And so it's not equiplausible or equireasonable to posit certain these models to get around the finitude of the universe that seems to be given to us by the Big Bang. But that doesn't even need to depend on classical physics. You don't need classical physics. It's kind of an unwarranted step to say that once we have quantum cosmology, then we're going to get it past infinite and past eternal universe. And that doesn't really seem to follow at all. So
that's good.
Imaginably powerful.
One last time, the Kalam argues only for a sufficient cause. An avalanche can be caused by the slip of a single pebble. There's no reason the cause of our universe needs to be anything more than adequate.
Much like God.
Okay,
the
so
argument shows that in fact it is quite.
The cause needs to have the probability raising resources to explain the effects the characteristics that we see. So if he's saying the cause is going to have some feature about it, i.e. power, to bring about a universe, right? So not just anything can bring about a universe, right? It's going to have some degree of power to bring about a universe, right? And I would assume that to bring about something as vast as our universe, something as complex as our universe, its foundation is going to need a pretty like considerate amount of power, causal power to do so. But then we can, you and I, we can posit, we can bring in the argument from arbitrary limits and show that irrelevant differences, all things being equal, that the power would have no limits. There would be unbounded power and things of that sort. But that's not going to look like anything physical, because then that's going to lack some kind of accidental property.
The argument from limits is such a nice tool. Like, it makes it really shows how the theistic hypothesis is so simple, because it shaves off all these arbitrary limits. So it's a lot of fun.
Quite reasonable to believe that God does exist.
All the cosmological argument does is point toward a cause, but tells us nothing about that cause. When the argument is said and done, we are left asking, what caused the universe? Craig says God, and others more honestly say, we don't know. If you think that...
Yeah, so this is the end of the video. This is the last couple play with Paul, and
Yeah,
I think this is very uncharitable towards Craig because like if you read his work, he's not like, well, we don't know, so let's just throw God on there and pack up our bags and go home. Like it's just very uncharitable.
As if Craig wants to walk into a physics meeting and go, "Hey, everyone, stop working on your models. Just stop it. Like I have the answer. It's God. Like pack up your bags and go home." It's like, no, like this is a metaphysical question. Which is we're looking at the ontological features of the universe as Craig defines it, and that if it is finite, if it is finitude, and the whole thing is stacked with finitude, then finitude is something, and I'll use Josh's language, finitude is something that we can call a contingency maker. And if something is contingent, then it has an explanation, a further non-circular explanation for its actualization, because it might have not been actual. And then that's going to require an explanation. And so this is not like theism versus science. And this is the problem, which is like the God hypothesis is not an alternative scientific hypothesis like intelligent design. This is strictly a metaphysical hypothesis. And so we're comparing these theories. If Paul is saying that there is some metaphysically necessary or brute contingency that is energy, and I say, well, then there is this beginningless cause that acts on the basis of reasons, like and can indeterministically bring about something. I can then do my theoretical comparisons and look at the intrinsic likelihood of both theories. But that's not at all what Craig's not trying to have some theological like cosmological model that he wants the physicists to take. He's just saying like we have good philosophical support for saying that if physical reality, space-time and all its constituents and all existing matter is finite, then that is the type of thing that requires an explanation. And an explanation is going to be something, it's going to have features that what is explained does not have, or else that's going to then be a part of the set that needs to be explained.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I think we're at a good point to kind of like leave off here. Sorry, my brain is just a little bit fried right now. But it's been so much fun, and I like Paul. Like he seems like a cool guy, but it's just like some of these videos where I'm just really not sure. Where it seems like he's like, it sounds like like I leave this video and it sounds like Paul thinks that like the Kalam's just done and there's no good reason to accept it, and that's just not the case. And like I don't think the Kalam's the best argument like for God at all, but I mean you can defend it a lot better than just like looking at it from like a 5-minute YouTube video. So I don't know. That's a little bit of my thoughts, and I'm a little scattered, but yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I recommend people to read Locke's formulation, God and Ultimate Origins, his novel Cosmological Argument. I think it is the best formulation of the Kalam. If I was to defend the Kalam, I'd use this one, not Craig's. And this one's going to bypass a lot of the main objections towards Craig's Kalam, and it has quite a bit of rigorous philosophical support. He goes into his discussion with Oppie, where he provides objections to Oppie's idea of uncaused beginnings, that you could have an uncaused beginning. So that's really good. And so people should be familiarizing themselves with the best versions of these arguments, not a 5-minute video that's probably meant to be shown in a church to those who are not physicists, those who are not metaphysicians. And you're going to get a much richer intellectual satisfaction off of this. So.
Yeah, it's been fun, Tim. Thank you so much for joining me. Paul, you're great. You're a cool dude. If you ever want to talk about the Kalam, I'm sure Tim and I'd be down. But yeah, thank you so much, Tim. It's been so much fun. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in. Purity, Susan, Computer Theist, Joshua, Salem, everyone else. If you enjoy the channel, please consider subscribing. Go subscribe to Invoking Theism, which is easy because I just added him in the YouTube description, so you can just go subscribe that way. If you enjoy the channel, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Apologetics. But Tim, thank you so much, man. You're looking pretty clean, by the way, my guy, even though I can't even see your eyes.
I know. Yeah, that's how I'm wearing the hat, and the way the sun's coming into the room.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a good one. God bless.
Thanks.